Greetings, super friends. Jonathan Levi here of Bitcoin Academy, and today I'm excited to bring you guys a very, very special exclusive video interview with Mr. Jeff Berwick of the Vigilante. He's actually one of the most popular and well-liked and known anarcho-capitalist and libertarian bloggers on the web right now. Now, like me, you may feel uncomfortable with the idea of anarcho-capitalism or libertarianism, but what I think you're going to find out throughout this episode, what I found out, is that it makes a lot of sense if you get into the numbers. I am the diehardest Berkeley sociology learning liberal, and even I started to feel, you know what? This guy's got a lot of really interesting stuff to say. It definitely opened my eyes. In the interview, we really talked about what's going on in the global economy. We talked about why it is all pretty likely to collapse. The whole banking system is this huge pile of debt. And we talked about what's going to happen after and how you can protect yourself. Jeff is a very outspoken advocate, not just of Bitcoin, but also of gold. And he talks about some strategies that you can start investing in. He talks about why all this is so important. And then we even get into some of the libertarian ideologies, the anarcho-capitalism. And I come to realize that it's not this evil, horrible, selfish idea that I always thought it was. So definitely a very eye-opening interview. And as I said, the video of this interview is exclusively available here on Bitcoin Academy. The audio will be chopped up and parts of it will go other places, but you guys are getting the exclusive video here first. So I hope you guys enjoy Mr. Jeff Berwick of Vigilante. So let's get back to protecting ourselves, right? We could talk a little bit about censorship and privacy online. We could talk probably, we've already talked about protecting your finances, hedge, buy a little gold, buy a little Bitcoin. Maybe don't invest your life savings in it, but what are kind of all the various ways that we can start protecting ourselves against these kinds of issues?
Well, it's interesting you say protect because it's also been very profitable. The things that I have recommended are just things like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And of course, Bitcoin, we're up about 300,000%. I recommended it at $3 in 2011. We've also been recommending gold, especially our senior analyst at the Dollar Vigilante. He's been recommending buy it since 2000. At 2000, it was $200. It's now $1,300. So, not as big of gain as Bitcoin, but one of the better gains, if you compare that to the stock market, if you compare it to, of course, currencies, if you compare it to most things, gold's actually been the outperformer, even in the last 16 years. So these have not only been protective, but they've also been very profitable. And I expect that will continue because what we're expecting is, as I pointed out, the central banks to print more and more money and for there to be lots of crisis and lots of collapses and actually complete chaos in the next few years. And because of that, things like gold, silver, and Bitcoin are very protective hedges against that. And while we might see cycles, we might see Bitcoin go down. It could go down to $5,000, $4,000. It could go to $3,000. I don't know where it's going to go, but
zero.
it could. It could. We'd have to see some crazy stuff happen for that to happen. Obviously, if the internet got turned off somehow, if the government turned off the power,
you would have full nodes operating,
Yeah, I've heard people say that even if they turn off the power, you could still do Bitcoin by hand with a piece of with a pencil and paper. It's like, I don't want to. That's
by the way, you have full nodes in space. So like even if the entire world, there's an EMP that erases every computer in the world, you have full nodes of the blockchain in freaking space on satellites, obviously, which is a
it's
pretty
very
amazing thing.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Like the people who really love Bitcoin are so passionate about it. They just get it everywhere because they really see it as being so important for humanity over the next few years because, as we have these central banks all collapse and all these fiat currencies collapse, and we will, that's baked in the cake. It's just going to happen in the next few years. Just look at any country where they've had those sort of problems and see what happens. Look at Venezuela, look at Zimbabwe, or even just look at a place like Greece where they shut down the banks last year or 2 years ago, and they were down for like 6 months. Or look at a place like Cyprus where they did a bank bail-in in 2015, I believe, and just took half of everyone everyone's money because the banks were bankrupt. This is going to happen all over the place. So if you look at those places, it's like, wouldn't it have been nice if you lived in Cyprus, Greece, Zimbabwe, or in Argentina before the collapse to own some gold, silver, and Bitcoin? Of course it would be. You'd be like super rich in those places, and you'd be in a great position to do what actually the central bankers and the elites do, which is buy up everything after everything's collapsed. You'd be in a great position to do that. So yeah, that's generally what I suggest people do.
I want to add a little bit here, few different points that we touched upon. First off, if it sounds crazy that governments are going to default on their debt, it has happened, and it happens a lot. And if you're like, oh, it's only happening in countries like Zimbabwe, it happened in Germany. Like after a war, governments will just print money until it collapses, and the Deutschmark collapsed, and my grandparents used to buy bread with a wheelbarrow. So this happens in big industrialized nations that compete in world wars. So it could happen to any nation. And I think that's an important thing to say. And also, I want to stress the fact that we're not giving investment advice here. At least I'm not qualified to give investment advice. But as an MBA, what you're saying is very, very conservative advice, which is hedge. Every MBA knows in your business, don't have one product. Have a couple products in case shit goes south. And in your stock portfolio, don't just buy Apple stock because Tim Cook might get hit by a bus tomorrow. And what you're essentially saying is, hey,
that might make the stock go up, actually.
It might. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. He's done a pretty good job after Steve Jobs.
I'm just saying it's not a sure thing that goes down.
Totally. But what you're saying is super sound advice, and I love the fact that coming from your position and with your political views, you could be like, put all your freaking money into Bitcoin. The shit's going south. Buy gold, buy Bitcoin, buy nothing else. But I love that you come from it, as a pragmatist and say, like, look, this is diversification. We've known about diversification since the advent of investment. Just maybe diversify a little bit wider. I would maybe add, one of the few things I think that's going to hold value is food and guns, but those are pretty hard to seriously treat as investment currency. But land. People are always going to need a place to live. And if I have a house in California, and if the dollar collapses, I'll accept Bitcoin. There will still be an economy that forms, and eventually governments will reform dollars or whatever. And if you have assets that are producing income for you, the medium of that income might change. But I would say, I'll take gold, I'll take Bitcoin for rent, no problem.
Yeah, there was stories. You're talking about the Weimar Republic hyperinflation back in the 20s. There was stories. I don't know if they're 100% confirmed, but it sounds about right that some people were going around with 1 or 2 gold coins and buying up hotels at the time. I think it might be an old wives' tale, but I think one of the big chains like Hilton or one of them, that's where they started apparently. But you can totally see that because once the economy collapses and there is no currency in the economy, that's actually the worst case scenario of anything when the currency collapses. It's bad when the economy collapses and there's so much debt that everything collapses and you have a major depression like what you saw in the 1929 depression in the US. That's really bad, but there's one step worse, and that's when the currency hyperinflates, and that's where we're headed right now. And that's because in the old days anyway, now we have Bitcoin and stuff like that. But in the old days, if there was no currency, you can't have an economy. It goes to barter. It's just over. And so if you have some sort of hard asset, and you were right to bring up things like property, land, those are also excellent. I also recommend that. But any sort of hard asset that doesn't get washed away in these major financial crises and collapses, then you're in an excellent position to start rebuilding. And that's really where generational wealth often is made, is in those transitions.
Yes. So I do want to ask, because I feel like we've given people a good scare here, but there's life after the collapse of fiat currencies, right? I mean, is it going to be a Walking Dead scenario, or is it going to be a perestroika in the 1990s Soviet Union kind of situation where, wealth gets reshuffled around and we rebuild?
It could go either way at this point. That's why I worked really hard because just like if we could have told people in Greece before they shut the banks down and convinced them, buy Bitcoin, buy gold, when the banks shut down, if a lot of people, not everyone, but if a lot of people had gold and Bitcoin, no one would have cared. They'd be like, I don't care. I've got gold and Bitcoin, right? But it's so funny because people, they always wait until it's too late. So, for example, in Greece, when they shut down the banks, the day before they shut down the banks, no one was in there trying to take all their money out. When they announced all the banks were closed, everyone lined up down the block. It's like, they're closed now. You should have been here yesterday. You should have been paying attention to what was going on. And of course, I was one of the people out there. This is like just 2 years ago, a year before, telling Greek people, buy Bitcoin, buy gold, you know? And I heard
Santanopoulos.
yeah. And, a few people listen, but not many. So if we can get more and more people to understand this, and this is why I do so many of these shows, I do so many interviews, I'm working all the time, because if we can get enough people to understand what's going to happen, then this collapse won't be that bad. If not enough people understand and everyone gets wiped out, like except for a few people, I'd be like, I'll be a trillionaire here with all my Bitcoin and gold, but everyone else be wiped out, which actually I don't want. I'd like to see everyone get through this together. But if not, we'll see everyone get wiped out. And then the real key is, do we allow the free market to function again, or do the people put in even stronger governments and central banks and make it even, if they look at the collapse and go, that happened because of the market, so we have to bring in a stronger government and stronger central banks, then we will have literally hell on earth, because it will be 1984 times 10, which is 19,840 or something like that. But if we can tell enough people that this collapse is actually caused by government's debt and central banking, that's what's causing it. So don't do that again. We will have freedom. And when you have freedom, just look at a place like Hong Kong, look at a place like Dubai, look at Singapore. Singapore was a fishing village like 50 years ago. If you were there like 60, 70 years ago, there was a couple guys with fishing rods. Totally. Now it's booming, and it's because there's a lot of freedom there. When you have low taxes, or hopefully no taxes, but low taxes, low regulation, the market just builds. And so if we get through this collapse and we have a free market after that, and Bitcoin survives through it, so we still have the internet, we still have power, we'll have a fantastic world. It could be peace and prosperity on earth like we've never known it. Or if enough people decide they want big governments and more central banking, we'll have it way worse than anything we can ever imagine. So that's really the stakes right now.